Good afternoon, everyone. Mutant XP back on the stream. Welcome to another edition of the Mutant XPerience podcast. My guest today, someone who certainly almost needs no introduction. We have today my very special guest, UltraDavid. How's it going, UltraDavid? Can you hear us?
I can hear you, but I can't react. My
Great.
face has been Oh no, it's back. Okay, fine.
Yeah,
I
there
was
we
just
go.
about to go on a whole rant
Yes.
about how I'm actually frozen in real life. Anyway, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, again, obviously, amidst all the things that are going on right now, I can't thank you enough for taking some time out to come on the show.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, David, you are, like I said in a tweet earlier this week, I consider you to be, one of the true pillars of the FGC.
Thank you very much.
And no, you're welcome. And I definitely want to spend this opportunity to learn more about you and your history with the FGC. Obviously, specifically your history with Third Strike. But we would be remiss if we didn't at least address some of the things that are going on right now with the coronavirus or the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
All of the events that are going on right now. And so before we get started with the podcast, I just wanted to give you guys sort of an update on, what the Jazzy circuit is currently doing in response to the situation. And so just to clarify some things, as of now, the Jazzy circuit has not made any official decisions, to alter any of our plans, with season 2. And that obviously includes the Jazzy Circuit finale, which is still scheduled to take place June 12th at Free Play Arlington. Again, we are monitoring the situation, and should that need arise, we will definitely take whatever steps are necessary to ensure the safety of everyone involved in the league. But what I can say is that the Jazzy Circuit, whatever decision we do decide to make in the next few days, we will issue another more public formal statement sometime by next Wednesday, March 18th. And so for those of you who are wondering what the status of Jazzy is and how things are going to play out, I just wanted to give you guys that short update. But since we're talking about the coronavirus, man, I mean, how's it been sort of impacting you, and how's it been affecting you over there in California?
Yeah, it's had a big impact already. So I'm typically traveling about 15 to 20 times per year for commentary, and I'm not sure that I'm going to break 10 this time. I mean, I've done 3 or 4 so far this year, and then beyond that, I don't have anything lined up. I mean, I'm expecting currently to be able to go to Combo Breaker, CEO, Evo. I don't know if any of that stuff's actually going to happen. But other than that, I don't have any specific, even for those, I don't have specific flights or things already lined up. So yeah, it's definitely having a big impact. And not just on commentary, by the way, but legally, most of my legal clients as a lawyer are in esports and game development. And, with all the stuff getting canceled, including E3 and GDC, that has a big impact on my game dev clients. So I'm pretty worried about things. I'll be frank, man. It's tough.
Yeah, well, I mean, not to put you on the spot, David, but what do you think about the decisions that some of the TOs and the FGC have made so far regarding their events?
I certainly understand canceling things. Yeah, both from the public health perspective and from the legal perspective. The idea of being liable potentially for helping lead to an outbreak. I don't know. The pandemics are rare, and so the law hasn't had to deal with them enough to really have fleshed out all the law surrounding them. But I suspect that there could be additional legal liability for having helped develop an outbreak if that does happen. And dude, if that were to happen at some FGC event, say that the news story is oh, huge outbreak occurs at local fighting game community event. That is the kind of news story that kills attendance at other events later. That would be really bad news, I think, for everybody else. So yeah, I get canceling. Some of the things are maybe it was a bummer that the Mortal Kombat Final Combat Last Chance qualifier was canceled the day before. If it had been canceled a few days before, okay, it was the timing of it that was frustrating. So for the extremely last minute cancellations, that is it's frustrating, but I get canceling it for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think one of the big challenges, obviously this is a challenge that myself and the Jazzy circuit are currently working through right now, is the timing issue. When exactly do you make a move?
Yeah.
Considering all of the factors involved in making that kind of huge decision.
Yeah.
And so definitely I understand your perspective on the last chance qualifier, especially like a day before when everyone's already
they're there. They already did travel. They were there, man.
They were there.
Dude,
yeah.
I was there. Most of the players were already there because it was canceled at something like 3 or 4 p.m. the previous day. So like people have done their flights or their drives or whatever it is. People who flew from other continents had been there for a couple of days to you got to get used to the time zone and stuff. It was the timing of it sucked, but the actual cancellation, I get it.
And so with that said, like I said, guys, Jazzy Circuit finale, maybe if we could call it a silver lining, David, the Jazzy Circuit finale isn't until June.
Right.
We have seen events in June get canceled already. But there's obviously there are certain events going on this month that needed attention, and so like I said, guys, we're definitely going to let you guys know what the future of the Jazzy Circuit Season 2 will be no later than next Wednesday, March 8th. And obviously, perhaps in the course of this podcast, David, the coronavirus issue will come up again.
Yeah.
But, I do also understand that there are a lot of coverage. There's a lot of coverage out there on the coronavirus, especially, with those of you that are home and are affected by the situation and are unable to go to work or are home for whatever reason. And, while I think it's important that we do be open about the situation and talk about it if, that's where the conversation goes. I also know that maybe some of you guys are sick and tired of hearing about the coronavirus, and maybe the reason you're tuning into this podcast is to maybe have a bit of a reprieve from all of the coverage on the situation. And so, I think now would be a good time to kind of shift gears a little bit and just talk a little bit about Third Strike, man, and talk about yourself and how Third Strike has sort of played a part in the way that your kind of relationship or your position in the FGC has evolved. But before I want to ask you, some to kind of tell us a little bit about that history, I did want to kind of share, and hopefully you don't mind, David, but I did kind of want to share actually a pretty recent memory that I have of you with the Stream Monsters. And so I don't know if you remember, because you go to so many events, but if you recall, we were able to hang out just a little bit at last October's East Coast Throwdown. Yeah. So shout outs to Zach and Long Island Joe and John and Sweet Johnny Cage. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the founders of ECT are Third Strike players.
Yeah.
Long-time Third Strike players. But I wanted to kind of share a most recent memory I had with you. I remember we had conversations about you perhaps commentating, but because of scheduling conflicts, you unfortunately weren't able to commentate, which is totally cool. But you did come into the arcade room afterwards. And if I recall, we were, I don't know how long it was, maybe 20, 30 minutes. We were just kind of sitting after the tournament. The tournament had already been finished, and we were just kind of sitting and just watching Third Strike and just kind of, pointing things out and observing things. And, I don't know how much you remember about that interaction, but as far as, I was concerned, it was really great because it was really sort of the first time, at least, maybe we did do this in the past. I don't know. I'm so old that, there's things that I forget. Sure. But but I'm pretty sure that was sort of the first time that I was able to just kind of, just sit with you and just, it was just kind of like just two Third Strike
Yeah, man.
players, sort of watching people play Third Strike. And I'm not going to get into details about what we discussed.
No, it was
during
cool
that
though.
interaction.
Yeah,
Not too
that was a
much.
lot. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I got some
Yeah,
games in. You got some games in. Yeah, that was fun.
yeah. It just, I mean, I don't know. It's not to plug, not to plug, my own stuff, but I was on a recent podcast hosted by Macherino, with Sermi, and one of the things that Sermi asked me, was kind of my feelings about Third Strike and how Third Strike has sort of impacted my
Hmm.
life, and it was just so hard to sort of describe just how just how much the game means to me. You know what I mean? And but the one thing that I do recognize, and this may sound hokey or not, but I can immediately recognize when someone else really loves the game.
Mm.
And that's kind of why I wanted to sort of open the podcast and share that, and share with the stream monsters that recent memory I had with you, because I don't know if you sort of felt it, but there was something about, we spent very little time together at EZT, but it was one of my favorite things about that event, just getting to sit down with you and just talking shit and just
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah, that was a lot of fun,
and
man.
just looking
That
at
was a
the
lot of
game
fun.
and watching and playing it. Yeah. But anyway, so with that said, tell us a little bit about how you got into the FGC, and eventually how you got into Third Strike.
Sure. So I started playing fighting games whenever Street Fighter 2 came out. I wasn't going to the arcades at that time because I lived in the suburbs and there was nothing that was close. But if my parents ever needed to go to the mall or something, then they would take me and my younger brother and they would let us hang out at the arcade while they were there. So I got a little bit of time with that stuff in the arcade. It was more about playing from home for me. So when Street Fighter 2 came out on the Super Nintendo, and Mortal Kombat came out, that sort of stuff, and all the way through the Dreamcast era. Uh, my brothers and I played a lot, and my friends and I played a lot, and none of us was good, of course, but we really enjoyed it. We got into it a lot. I remember feeling even then as a kid that there was something that really grabbed me about it, and I think even at that time, without thinking about it, without putting it into words at that time, there was something about the strategy of it that really got me in, and really hooked me. So I played a lot of uh, Super Nintendo. I played a lot of on the Dreamcast, especially. I played a lot of Marvel 2, just with my friends and family. And I was playing jank teams, it was probably Guile, Nash, Juggernaut, whatever, right? Something that somebody who doesn't know anything would play. Then when I went to college in 2001, I went to UC Berkeley, and they happened to have a good arcade there. And by good, I mean not particularly large, but people from the rest of the San Francisco Bay Area would come and play. So we would get people from San Jose and from San Francisco, and even from UC Davis, which is quite a drive away. And some of the best players in the country occasionally came. Ricky Ortiz would come sometimes. John Choi was there sometimes. That level of player came sometimes. And when I first got there, my experience was the same as I think almost everybody who gets into the FGC, where you get in and you're thinking to yourself, I'm the best of my friends and family, so I'm really good, right? Haven't we all been there? And when I got to this arcade and I just got demolished, it was surprising to me, and I hated losing. But in losing, there was something addictive about it for me, where I could see that there was this higher level of gameplay that was possible, and I was really inspired to reach that. So at the arcade there were two games that we played the most at that time anyway, and that was Third Strike and Super Turbo. And when I got there, I did not know that there was ever a Street Fighter 3, and I did not know that there was ever a Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. I had no idea because I was just playing from home the whole time, and just didn't have much access to arcades. So that was a big surprise, and I instantly fell in love with both of those games. And I like I said, was terrible and didn't know anything, and it became kind of an obsession for me to improve. So I got a Dreamcast, and so I could play from home, and I went to the arcade all the time, and I skipped class for the arcade, and it just was immediately something that I fell in love with, and couldn't give up anymore. So I started playing uh, Vega and ST. That was my first character, and not that I knew he was good or bad. I just that was it. And I started playing. I think Oro was the first character I played in Third Strike, and it took me a little while, to sort of settle on other characters. Eventually, I settled on Zangief and ST and Q and Third Strike, which we can talk about later, I guess. But that was those are the two characters that I really settled into, and so I began taking things like seriously in about 2002. And yeah, I mean, I went to the locals that we had at that place, and sometimes I forget who even set this up at the time, but there were actually school battles between Berkeley and UC Davis, and I think San Jose State came up sometimes, and we would all meet at the UC Berkeley barricade. And on top of that, Berkeley has this kind of unique idea where any student can teach a class. It's called a DCal. I think it's Democratic Education at Cal is what it stands for. And so anybody can teach whatever they want as long as they get some teacher to approve, say that it's a good idea, and to sort of keep an eye on things in general and to approve the syllabus and stuff like that. So this program allowed, now I don't even remember the guy's name, unfortunately, but there was a fighting game class at UC Berkeley in probably 2003 or so, maybe 2004 spring semester. And I took it, and we read things like the old Seth Killian articles that are on shoryuken.com, and we read uh, David Serlin article, and we read like The Art of War, and we had lab, like a real class. And lab was, let's go to the arcade, and we'll like try stuff out and see how our thoughts about strategy are evolving, and practice execution and stuff like that. It was really great to have that, and that helped me figure things out as well, and sort of cemented me, I think, even further in liking fighting games. And then at that point, I was fully into it, and I played a lot. I am from Southern California, so whenever I'd go home for summer break or winter break or whatever it was, I would go to the arcades that we have in SoCal. At that time, Simi Valley, which was very close to where I grew up in Ventura County, had a good arcade called Interface, and it had a little bit further than that in the valley, in the San Fernando Valley, was Family Fun Arcade, which was obviously gigantic for Third Strike. And sometimes I would drive a little further and go to the other arcades that were in SoCal still at that time. Evo wasn't that far at that time. It was in Cal Poly Pomona, which was maybe an hour's drive away from where my parents lived. So I had easy access to a super strong scene whenever I was home. And when I was at school, I had a strong scene. I then went to law school at Georgetown in DC, and there was no arcade scene anymore. And so I had to get a stick, which I built. I had to meet people on SRK. I had to drive with them. Sometimes I rented a car to do that. Sometimes people would pick me up, or I would like use public transport to get to places. And yeah, I was meeting up with people to play probably once a week, or once every couple of weeks at most, and going to monthlies that we had at C3 out there, which sometimes other people would come to from far away. Sometimes we got New York there, sometimes we got North Carolina there. Very strong scenes, of course. Philly would be there sometimes, and I really enjoyed that stuff. I got to study abroad in both Paris and London. I had played in both cities. I met the Third Strike scenes out there. Then when I finished law school, I moved back to LA, and at that point, to be honest, I had a big falling out with Third Strike. I hated it for a while, and I hated it, I think, in retrospect, because I'd been playing Q the whole time, to be honest. But I'm serious. So I decided that I would try out Chun-Li for just a little bit to see, like, how it would go. Maybe I hate this game because I'm playing a trash character. I don't know. What if I picked a good character? So I picked up Chun-Li, and within a month, I made top 8 at Family Fun, which I had only done once with Q ever, and it like came instantly. It felt with Chun-Li, and so rather than making me think that like, oh, I should have just been playing a good character, that made me think I've wasted my time. I can't play this game anymore. So I hated it for maybe a couple of years, and it wasn't until the 25th anniversary version came out, and there was a Capcom put on 25th anniversary tournaments for it. Oh, and I was already commentating at that time, having started in Street Fighter 4 and Marvel 3 and stuff.
Are you referring to the 15th anniversary?
The 25th anniversary tournaments that were going on, because it was 25 years since Street Fighter 1 came out, I think is what it was. And right, and so they had tournaments for Super Turbo and for Third Strike.
Oh, that was 25th. Yeah, for some reason I was thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking about the anniversary collection.
Right, anniversary collection. Yeah, whatever that was called. Yeah. Collection. Anyway, so having that tournament series go on and just thinking about the game more again, I realized that I really missed it, and I got back into playing online, and I played a bunch on whichever the online was at that time. Was it Fightcade yet? I don't really remember, but it was that's what got me back into it. So ever since then, whenever I have a chance to play it usually at a major, because there's no more consistent like public arcades here, but sometimes going up to people's houses to play Third Strike and playing whenever I have a chance, something I've been doing ever since.
You know, one of the great things that I like about doing this podcast is I like discovering just how many parallels I have with other Third Strike players in terms of their journey through the FGC. And just hearing your journey just sort of reminds me of how similar it is, or was, or could have been for myself. We're around probably the same age. And I had an opportunity to go to UC Berkeley, actually.
Okay.
But I don't want to throw my parents under the bus, but I had some pretty protective parents at the time, and despite getting into UC Berkeley, they insisted that I stay closer to home, and so I ended up going to UC Irvine.
Okay.
As an undergrad. And when you mentioned your college arcade, I just wanted to kind of take this time to shout out all of those old school college arcades back in the day. So I am a UCI alumni, and so we had the Zot Zone. I don't know if you ever made your way to the Zot Zone.
Oh yeah, I went to UCI.
The UCI arcade.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the really annoying things was, and I don't know how it was for the arcade in Berkeley, but the games at Zot Zone were all 50 cents. Which
oh really? I don't remember that. Wow.
Was rough. It was
that
rough.
Sucks.
Obviously being a college student as well. Yeah. I mean, it would still be rough now.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Especially if you're asking me to pay 50 cents at a barcade or something.
Yeah, dude, yeah. No, it was 25 cents for us. Jeez.
Yeah, it was 50 cents at Zot Zone, which I have no idea why.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know. Do you remember how those, like, did they just hire an independent contractor to kind of, like, go in there and run their arcade? Or was it something that the school did? I don't know if you know.
I believe it was something that the school did, because the reason, so it got shut down right after I left, and it was the decision of, I believe, the student government to shut it down. They wanted to have a gelato place on campus. There were, I think, 3 other gelato places already within walking distance right off of campus. Whatever, that's what they wanted. So I think that they had control, basically, because they were the ones who ended up shutting it down. That really sucked.
And like you described, I cut my teeth, so to speak, in the same arcades and in the same scenes that you did. I learned the game, and a lot of my early tournament experiences are from the arcades that you've already mentioned: Interface, Family Fun, and then later on, obviously, Denjin. And then you moved to the East Coast, and I did that too.
Right, yeah.
I moved to the East Coast for grad school too, and I moved to New York. And so obviously I had the luxury of being able to play at Chinatown Fair.
Right.
When I first went there, when I first moved there, which was late 2006. I don't know how you felt, because I definitely feel like, at least at that time, that Third Strike wasn't as popular
Right.
on the East Coast as it was on the West Coast. I don't know. Do you think that would be a fair assessment?
I do. Yeah, I felt that as I was at the East Coast. I got there in fall of 05, and I was there until spring of 08. And during that time, I feel like it grew. But when I first got there, it was not the major game. It was CVS2, definitely. At least, I mean, where I was in, like, Maryland had such a strong scene for CVS2, for example. It wasn't, I feel like, until a little later, even during those few years, that I noticed more people playing. There were people playing the whole time, but I felt like they weren't very strong. Not that I was winning anything, but, like, I could feel the difference between, like, the best players there, and then go home and I'm playing, like, Pyro and whoever else, and just getting, like, absolutely mauled. And it was a different story in terms of skill level, is what I felt. But yeah, I mean, as I was there, I feel like it actually did become one of the main games by the time I left.
And despite what we think about the I guess what we would call the skill gap between East Coast and West Coast, at least at that time, when we first moved to the East Coast, one of the things that I did recognize very early on is what the East Coast did not have, sort of in volume, because in the West Coast, everyone played, like, it almost seemed like everyone played Third Strike,
especially in SoCal, because I would say
especially in SoCal,
in NorCal
CVS2
was
CVS2
about as much, maybe, or maybe even more than Third Strike. But yeah, SoCal was Third Strike for sure.
But what I did notice right off the bat is that the people that were really serious about Third Strike in the East Coast were really serious about Third Strike in the East Coast. Like, they really enjoyed the game. They loved the game. They were dedicated to the game. They were devoted to the game. Just to kind of run off some names that you probably are familiar with. From the Maryland scene alone, we had guys like, obviously, Exodus, the patron saint of Maryland Third Strike. We had Shinsei, Kimmix.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Seiko. Do you remember Seiko?
I remember the name.
Player? Yeah. I don't know where Deviljin was from.
Yeah, Deviljin's there. Yep.
Well? Deviljin. And then in the New York scene, I think in the New York scene, I mean, as far as high profile Third Strike players, one of the things that I immediately recognized in New York is that a lot of the high profile players, or like the best Third Strike players in New York, were also just the best fighting game players.
Yeah.
Period.
Right.
Justin, John Gordon, Eddie Lee. I mean, Henry Sen. These are guys that were not just great at Third Strike, but they were just great in every game. And so it was really interesting to kind of see the differences between the coasts.
Yeah, and so to talk about the progression, before I got there, I think Exodus was already strong, but the other players, like, got strong as I was there. I feel like I remember Eric coming out for the first time. Not Shinsei, Kimmix. Like, I think I was there when he was first coming out, and by the time I left, he was one of the best players for sure. Deviljin had that kind of an arc. Who am I thinking of? Jay, Epsilon. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely players who leveled up substantially during that period of time. Like, I see Shimano Express saying that Third Strike started to pick up, like, around 08 in NY. I would say in the middle part of the East Coast, like Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina and stuff, I would say it was maybe a year or two earlier than that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, by the time I left in 08, I noticed it was substantially better than it was when I got there in 05.
Yeah, and another parallel, David, is I left the East Coast temporarily in 2009 and came back for about a year before returning to New York. And it's just so weird. Like,
it's cool
when
though.
I do these podcasts, I learn all these parallels. It's, we didn't really know each other, but, like, we were sort of on the same kind of journey.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly knew your name. I mean, the scene was so small. I feel like I knew, like, the name of most people who were playing in tournaments. Like, I knew of them, if not maybe I'd seen their name on SRK or on Pound Capcom or whatever it was. Um, but yeah, no, it was not a big scene, but it was definitely growing. And yes, Jelvin played Ibuki.
Yeah, and another thing that I recognized, when I went to the East Coast, is that there were a lot of there were some players that were focusing on certain characters that the West Coast didn't focus on.
Mm.
Like, for instance, in the West Coast, and I'm going to drop a name that's really, really old, David, and I don't know if you're going to recognize this name, but, like, for example, if we take a character like Yang,
Yeah,
we all know how strong Yang is now, but in the genesis of the American Third Strike scene, no one really wanted to use him.
yeah,
Or it didn't seem like he was a very popular
not
character,
popular at all.
at least on the West Coast. And so when I moved to the East Coast in 2006 and I met Kale,
Right.
who, by the way, he's been on a previous podcast for
How cool.
viewers who want to check that out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Mutant XPerience. Like, do we really, aside from, I think NorCal, they had ROM. But even before ROM, like I'm talking about like when you and I got into the scene, 2001, 2002. The only player that I could even remember even doing well with that character at that time was a SoCal player by the name of Geo. You remember Geo?
I don't remember Geo.
GEE-O? Oh, okay. Again, around that time, you probably spent more time, in NorCal.
Definitely NorCal, yeah.
Yeah, but Geo was a name that I remember. He was one of the very first American Third Strike players that, I would sort of group him with like Frankie, and even to a certain extent JR. Just sort of that sort of generation, like the generation before Pyro and and Vic.
Right.
Or maybe I would even put Vic in that.
Okay.
That pre-generation, along with Paulie and other SoCal players. But aside from that, there are certain characters that you could definitely tell, like, West Coast didn't mess with them, but for some reason the East Coast did. And I'm curious. I wonder if that was sort of something that the East Coast players kind of recognized, like they did that in reaction to that, or maybe they just kind of developed their own sort of style and tradition on their own, because obviously the scene is not as connected as it is now.
Right. Yeah. And it was so small.
So going from like one completely different region to another, it's such an eye-opening experience.
Right.
Because you go into a scene and you face players that do not play the way you're used to.
Right. That's definitely true. Yeah.
And I feel like that's one of the things that's been lost, for better or for worse, right, as time has gone on in the FGC, that surprise. I don't know if you felt it when you first went over there, but it was like, wow, they play different.
Definitely. SoCal was much more offensive than Maryland and Virginia and DC were. Maryland, I mean, especially if you look at who the best players were in Maryland and CVS2, it was so slow. I mean, the way they played CVS2 would put me to sleep. Whereas if I were to go home and watch SoCal or NorCal players play, they were dashing constantly, running all over the place. It was so fast. Third Strike doesn't really have like that sort of difference that I think you can do, but it was definitely a slower style of play for sure. Nobody played Ryu. Nobody played Alex. And those were like so common in SoCal. Like everybody had a pocket Alex or had a pocket Ryu, you know what I mean? And
or our SoCal Third Strike obsession with Ken mirrors.
Everybody played Ken. The characters in, at least where I was living, there wasn't a character that was like more common there, but there were fewer players. So I mean, we had our Chuns and Kens and Makotos, and we had an Ibuki, just like we had an Ibuki in SoCal, a couple of Ibukis in SoCal. I mean, I wouldn't say that there was like additional characters selected there, just because there weren't as many players. But yeah, I remember being surprised that nobody played Alex or Ryu in particular, because I felt they were super common whenever I went back home.
And can you talk a little bit about how you were received when you first went out there? Did people know you, or did they know like that you were coming, or that there was this player from family that was
actually? Yeah,
coming to the East Coast.
They did actually, yeah.
Yeah.
So I posted up on Shoryuken in the little regional matchmaking things that they used to have, and so people knew like from that side. But yeah, I had been so active on Shoryuken, just posting constantly in the Third Strike forums, especially in the Q area where I wrote a just huge fac about how to play Q, and I was on Pound Capcom all the time. So I mean, people did know who I was, at least like sort of the more dedicated ones, and they wanted to get games in definitely. So it wasn't hard to show up and basically instantly have access to the scene, be part of the scene. That was right away. People were very welcoming. They wanted to know all about what it was like in what they themselves considered the sort of hub of Third Strike in the U.S., which is SoCal. Like they even in Maryland, D.C., Virginia area, they understood. I mean, they wanted to know like what was it like to play in a big arcade? Like what was it like to play in an area that had these players that we all look up to? So they were very curious about that stuff. And I think as I was there and they all developed as players, that became, I think, a little bit less of a focus because I think they started to think that they were strong too. But when I got there, definitely it was people were very curious about what it was like in SoCal. And when I studied abroad in Paris and London, it was the same exact thing. I posted on SRK that I'll be there. Let's get games, and so we did. It was very easy to set up, and people there wanted to know like what's it like to hang out with. I'll never forget the guys in London asking me whether Alex Val was a cool guy. Like they had only ever read the name, and if you're in London or if you're in England or France and you read that name, you think about how you'd pronounce it in French, most likely, which is Val. And so they didn't even think about Alex's heritage. They had no idea. They just wanted to know
Alex Val.
Yeah, Alex Val. They wanted to know whether Alex Val was a cool guy. So yeah, they all wanted to know like what it was like to play in SoCal, and I felt very lucky that I did have that sort of knowledge.
Well, that's another thing I didn't know about you. You spent a summer abroad. Is that what you
I spent a
said?
summer in London and I spent a semester in Paris. Yeah. So when I went to Paris,
So
the players there, I played with Pêcheur and Mimosa and a couple of other.
Billy Kane.
Actually, Billy Kane couldn't make it. Yeah, I remember being bummed about that. And then when I went to London, they had a nice little scene. That was in summer of 2006. So they had a nice little scene. I mean, it wasn't an arcade. It was in a LAN center that was run by the Prince. And I hung out with like Harmonaz and Bass and Rakurai and several other people. They had a good scene, to be honest. But they too wanted to know like what it was like in SoCal. Even though London's a giant city, right? Like they have a lot of history themselves. But they wanted to know what that was like. I remember I was also disappointed that Ryan Hart wasn't there that summer. I think he was in Japan. I really wanted to get games in and meet Ryan Hart, but that didn't work out either.
Yeah, I perhaps one of the casualties of your falling out with Third Strike, a few years ago is that you were able to interact with those scenes at a very early point in the history of the Third Strike. I remember another parallel. I first went to the UK and Paris in 2016.
Okay.
As part of my honeymoon.
Ooh.
And I was able to play. I was able to go to at the time their big arcade in Paris was called Arcade Street.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to be able to go there one night before they eventually closed, just a few short months after. And then I went to the UK, and at the time, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the Gutter Trash event, Third Strike Gutter Trash event. And so they had started to pick up momentum, and I went there, and we did a little event together, and I was able to, like you, for the first time, get some games in with some really strong UK players, like you said. Harmonaz. There was this one Urian player, and forgot his name. He plays Blue Urian, and he Oh man, I totally forgot. But he like Harmonized. They're like from the northern part of England, I think. But I forgot what his name was.
Naz,
But
I got to know Naz pretty well. We hung out a bunch. I went over his house. His dad made tea for us. Like it was super cool to spend time with him, and it was really rare to be able to record video footage at that time. It wasn't impossible. It just didn't happen very often. But now I don't even remember the circumstances. But Naz had the ability to record, or maybe I had the ability to
wow.
record, and like I brought it to him. I honestly don't even recall now. But so I somehow ended up with
Because it's
these.
so common now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and I wish I could remember. This is 14 years ago now, but I don't. How I got that footage, and whatever, I ended up with it, and so I brought it home and I uploaded it to the pretty new service called YouTube, and
Mhm.
yeah, those matches are still up there on my YouTube channel all these years later.
Yeah, the interesting thing about my visit to the UK, at least interesting to me, in 2016, it was at a point in the history of their scene where they had already started seeing the emergence of a second generation.
Mhm.
Those gutter trash, I affectionately call them the gutter trash kids, uh, because they're so much younger than either of us. But it was at a point when the UK third strike scene was starting to see the emergence of a newer generation. And these are the gutter trash
Mhm.
kids, the guys that are still running events to this day. As a matter of fact, gutter trash, their next event, incidentally enough, is on the same weekend as the Jazzy Circuit finale. Again, who knows what's gonna happen with any of
Of
these
course, yeah,
events
yeah.
that are going on. But shout outs to the gutter trash kids for continuing their tournament series and continuing to keep Third Strike alive in the UK. But when I went there in 2016, it was a very interesting time in their history because, like I said, there was this new generation coming, and then the older generation, probably the players that you were able to play with, they all started to kind of live their lives
Right.
as adults of our age are apt to
Most of us
do,
do, yeah.
and they started to drift a little further apart from the scene. But what was really awesome, and I can't thank them enough, but when I told them that I was coming, they really made a concerted effort to come out
Mm.
and to this event that I was attending. And so, yeah, players like Harmonaz and Singho, and again, the blue Urian player whose name I forgot, I'm sorry. Um, they all came down to London, and they don't live anywhere near London. They
Huh.
live in northern England. I don't know if you remember.
At that
Was
time,
Harmonaz living in
yeah,
London
yeah,
at the
uh-huh,
time?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. At that time, he and his family were in London. He wasn't married yet. I heard that later he got married, but no, he was just living with his parents. They were in London. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it was really awesome to see those players, and it was really cool to see the older generation interacting with the newer
Mm-hmm.
generation. And I guess as we get older, we're starting to think about those things and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's cool.
Um, but I think now it's a good time to take our first break. But when we come back, I kind of wanted to shift the focus on your main on your character choice, your long and tortuous
Okay,
history as a Q player. I guess according to
you got it.
UltraDavid, Confessions of a Q player. And so we'll go ahead and take a quick break. But don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more Mutant Experience podcast with UltraDavid. Hey guys, Mutant XP back on the mic. We are here with more Mutant XPerience podcasts, episode 37 with my very special guest, none other than UltraDavid. So, as we were on break, David, there are people in the chat that are trying to blow you up.
Okay.
More specifically, Dirtmaster, aka Adam. Shoutouts to Dirtmaster. He was one of the 16 players that qualified for last year's Jazzy Circuit finale. He is from the Chicago area, another longtime Third Strike player. Shout out to Adam and Dirtmaster and everyone over there in the Chicago Third Strike scene. But is it true, UltraDavid, that at the last Red Bull event, you exclaimed "America sucks" after Sugiyama, who is by far the best Necro player in the history, and still is the best Necro player in history of Third Strike? When he managed to defeat Frankie and Justin at grad finals. Is that true? Did you actually say that?
I really don't remember, to be honest. If that is something I said, then I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That would suck. I just honestly can't recall. But yeah, I mean, my bad if so. I definitely shouldn't say that kind of thing. No, yeah, I mean, I remember at Evo 2003, I believe. What year was the Diagonal Parent? Was it 2000?
It was 04. It was 04. Sugiyama came.
Yeah. So Sugiyama came. I remember watching him playing pools, and he was like sitting there with his backpack on, chatting to his friends like as he's playing a tournament, and he's like barely paying attention, but he's like he wins his first match, and then he played against somebody who beat him one game as he's like again like barely paying attention. So he loses the game. He takes off his backpack. He like actually moves his body towards the monitor. He starts like actually paying attention, and he double perfected the guy. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to suggest that I should be mentioned in the same breath as Sugiyama, but as a Necro main, having played him for so very long, now, sort of in retrospect, I see just how dangerous a character like Necro is. Well, I mean, I think all characters in Third Strike, I think that's one of the appeals of Third Strike. Well, maybe with the exception of 12, but okay. or maybe I don't know, but
yeah,
like I feel like a lot of the characters, they're all very scary. They can all be very scary, and there's things that you have to sort of respect and fear about every character.
Right.
And so in retrospect, I see that, but. For the viewers that are Third Strike players, UltraDavid, they associate you most closely with Q. You are a self-professed Q main. You have been since the beginning, it seems. You did talk about Oro. I did want to kind of get your thoughts on what attracted you to Oro first and foremost. But yeah, as a Q player, I mean, tell us a little bit about how you eventually ended up on Q and how you eventually ended up sort of choosing him as your main.
Oro I played because I thought he looked weird, and that's kind of, I've always liked weirdos in games. Even before I was playing competitively, I always liked to play like kind of weird looking characters. And I think that was part of why I went to Zangief as well, rather than like having some kind of like thought about his play style. I wasn't even at that level yet. It was who looks cool, who do I like the look of, and I thought he was like, I think that's why, because they were like kind of weirdos. But then having played him for a little bit, Oro that is, I don't remember thinking that he fit me, and I don't think there was even like a good reason why. I think I was just not at that level of like understanding what the character's strengths or weaknesses are.
Was anyone even too familiar with his unblockables at that point? I mean,
with Oro?
Yeah. I mean, I think a little bit, but it wasn't like.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Again, some of the players who would come would be like some of the best players in the country. So they had done as much homework as you could do really at that time. There wasn't like to watch or whatever really, but yeah, they knew a little bit. Anyway, for whatever reason, I ended up switching to Q. I think it was because I thought Q was cooler. Again, I didn't know if he was good or not. Didn't even factor into the decision. I just thought Q was really cool. And I don't think I played Oro for that long, right? It was not like a year. I think it was a couple months at most, maybe less. And then I switched to Q. And it was just because I thought he was sick.
Before you go any further, David, just really quick question. Because I don't play SF5. but I know you
Yeah,
do.
I
Is
do.
GQ?
Well, it's not explicit, but yeah, I mean,
No, but like in the
his.
storyline, is he or no? They're
It's
not.
not. It's not explicitly said that he's Q. No, no,
Okay,
no.
okay,
But like he's got Q's moves. Like
okay.
it's very obvious that it's supposed to be Q. He's got dash punch. He's got stand medium kick. His jump normals look the same. A lot of his ground normals look the same. He has his V skill 2 is literally Q's taunt animation. Like it's very clear that it's supposed to be Q.
Okay.
But yeah, it's never explicitly stated.
Okay, go ahead, sir. I just wanted to clarify that.
And when G first came out, I played him a lot because I was like, how could I not finally play good Q? But I ended up quitting him because I don't feel like he's my style of character. That's all. But he's very good. So as far as Q went, I just don't think that I was playing at the kind of level where using a strong character or a weak character really mattered. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't
totally agree. Yeah.
approach that yet. So I stuck with the character, and
not in your case, but just in general. I think.
No, yeah, right.
Like when
right.
you pick up
yeah.
any game,
it doesn't
right?
matter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just play who you like at first. So I knew I was losing a lot, but it wasn't any different if I played another character. You're right. I just was losing. So I liked Q because I thought he was cool, and I grinded it, and I got to be pretty decent. In retrospect, I think it was probably pretty presumptive of me to make a giant how to play Q fac in like a year later.
I did want to ask you if you.
I don't really know why I thought that was something that I should do because I was certainly not even at that time like a level of play where I was doing anything important. But I did have that fact that I spent a huge amount of time on, hundreds of hours.
Have you recently?
Amount of time on.
Have you recently kind of gone back and read it?
I looked at it a few years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't agree with a good amount of what I said in there. Not all of it. Some of it was definitely right, but I would say a lot of it was right. But
that's okay, right? You know, it's to me, it's not so much because at that point the game was still, relatively new, I guess. Especially when you think about the different circumstances back then. Obviously, with the internet and more technology, I guess we could say the lifespan, I guess, or the sort of, I don't know, I'm lost right now. I'm thinking of the word, but the kind of the time it takes to kind of learn the game, obviously, is much more truncated now.
There are so few resources.
Then. Yeah.
And it wasn't just lack of video, which again just didn't exist. You had to get a VHS. I mean, it was that was so rare. But it was also most scenes were small, so it was rare unless you were playing like one of the very common characters. It's rare to have anybody else in your area who was playing your same character. So you just didn't have you like weren't able to bounce ideas off people in person or by watching video. And even on SRK, there were character forums. But there weren't like a lot of people in each character's forum, and some of the characters who were, especially the less popular ones, only had a few people posting in them. At least as far as like posting like helpful tips. So it was not easy to pick up a new character. There was not a lot of resources out there to help you do that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I played him a lot. The reason that I made that fac and I spent so much time on SRK is that I loved talking about the strategy of fighting games. And I liked, to the extent I could help anybody out, I really liked doing that. So that was what that was about. I think more than thinking that I was like a fantastic player. But so I was playing in Berkeley, and when I would go home, it got to be the point where when I went home, I would post on SRK that I was going to be there, or like text a friend, and no, definitely not text a friend. I didn't own a cell phone.
Wait, back in when? 2000?
Like 2003. I didn't get a cell phone until my senior year of college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That wasn't unusual.
No, it wasn't. I got my first cell phone in, I believe, the summer of 1999.
In 19? Is that what you said?
Yeah. They had the Nokias.
You were in the 19s, you got a cell phone? Oh my god.
It was the last year of the 90s.
I can't believe it. That was high technology, dude. Anyway, so I didn't get a cell phone until the end of college. Whatever. I would come down to play in SoCal and post about it, and there would be people who would want to play me because Q was so rare that even though he's not a great character, even though I wasn't particularly great with him, I might have been the best that people had access to at that time. So I remember like people wanting to meet up and play and get together when I was down just to get that character experience because that was not something that was easily gettable otherwise.
Hmm.
And it was the same thing. That was part of why like it was easy for me to meet up with people in Paris and London too because it just wasn't they didn't have a queue really, and they wanted to like at least get some experience. Again, not I wasn't great, but I was like at a decent enough level that I could be like, here's what the character does. So we could play. Um, yeah, so I never did a lot with the character. I got top 8 at V Time, which was a tournament in the East Coast. That was in 2005 or 6, whenever something like that. So that was the only major that I ever got top 8 at. I got top 8 a couple of times at Family Fun. That was not common, but it happened a couple of times. And that was in an era, to be fair, where getting top 8 was not the prize that it's considered today. Like today, if you say that you get top 8, that's something to be happy about. At that time, it wasn't that big of a deal. You were top 3 or top 4, and then you could say like, "Oh, I did well." But if you were top 8, that wasn't like a marked thing until I would say a little bit later that you would write home about. But anyway, I got top 8 a couple of times. Yeah, I don't know. I was never fantastic, but it was always super fun to play. Um, the thing about Q, I mean, obviously he's not one of the better characters in the game. He's on the weaker side,
So
and so
how soon did you kind of know that once
I knew that
you
within a
started the
within
game?
a yeah, within a year for sure. I had gotten from the point where I was not at a level where I could even tell to the point where I was like, all right, this character is like I'm seeing what these other characters I'm playing against are doing, and I just like can't do that stuff. Uh, so I think that was something I realized pretty quickly. But I also at that time I was very stubborn in many ways, not just in this particular way, but I was stubborn in a lot of ways. And I didn't want to switch. I didn't want to be made to switch. I didn't want the sort of reality of the situation to make me switch. And it became important to me as like a part of my like self-identity was that I was a Q player. And if I thought about switching away from Q to somebody else, it would be like as if I was giving up on myself. I got way too serious about it. And I I didn't even have a secondary really. I mean, I would play Hugo and 12 were the secondaries that I had, and that's not really much of a step up either. So it was important to me to win with the character that I liked, and I at the same time recognized that that was not likely. So I can recall going to tournaments and having conversations with friends, being like, "So, how do you think you're going to do?" As we're driving there, my friends would be like, "Oh, I'm shooting for whatever position. I think I can beat X or Y player," and I'd just be like, "Yeah, I'm probably not gonna do great." Just like recognizing it. Like at C3, we had tournaments for both Third Strike and Super Turbo, and I won a lot of the Super Turbo tournaments there. So as we were driving there, I'd be like, "Oh, I'll probably win Super Turbo. I probably won't do anything important in Third Strike. Maybe I'll go 1 and 2." Like I was the same player in both of the games, but I recognized that my character was going to be a big uphill battle. And so I think that without sort of making the excuse of, well, I'm losing because I have a bad character. I didn't make that excuse, but I think I might have let the idea that he was too weak into my brain too much, and because of that, not shoot for a higher position that I might have been able to if I had thought that I should take it more seriously. I think the idea that I thought I was playing a trash character made me think that there wasn't going to be success, that I just couldn't do it because the character wouldn't allow it. And so as a result, I put in less work into Third Strike. I was never a fan of making the argument that I should make it an excuse. I would never say to myself or to anybody else that I lost because of the character. I always recognized it was my choice. It was my choice to play the character, and I could easily select somebody else if I thought that I would, if it was important enough for me to do so. But I think I did sort of underperform what I may have been able to because I thought that the character was so weak. So,
Yeah,
um,
your comments actually remind me of something that I have been thinking about a lot quite recently, and that is uh, sort of the complexities that were unique when it came to trying to get better at a game during our time, during the arcade era, as opposed to what that process looks like right now. This is sort of where our experiences deviate. You stuck with Q, and then you said you had dabbled with Chun later on. I
yeah.
started with Ken,
Okay.
and then I switched very early on to a lower tier character, and that was sort of the that was kind of the eye opening decision, that
Mm,
I made. And I was just recently been thinking about those complexities, and just to kind of, again, these thoughts are still a little bit unformed, but it's funny that you mention how, because, like, first and foremost, let's get a few things straight, right? Like, back in the day, you had to pay to play. That's the first
yes.
thing I want to point out. You couldn't just, there was no really such thing as free play, at least very few. Maybe an arcade would run an event, but
Yeah.
probably
Very rare.
very
Very
rare.
rare.
So the amount of time that you could spend on the game is already limited because of
Hmm.
the fact that we had to learn the game in the arcade. We didn't get a port until the Dreamcast port. And I think that obviously opened up a lot of things. Just the ability to be able to have a training mode, for the
Right.
game obviously was super huge. Um, but for the most part, and this is kind of an interesting tangent. Even during the Dreamcast days, there was never a discussion of, hey, let's all start playing Third Strike on Dreamcast. Let's all start running tournaments on Dreamcast. It was never Dreamcast, the Dreamcast port. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but back when we were growing up, David, ports were always seen as kind of like, okay, we can't always go to the arcade. We
Yeah.
can't always go there to compete. So it's nice to at least have something at home. But at least at that point, you know, probably before Evo 2004, there was never this feeling like, oh, okay, let's switch to console for tournament standard. That didn't happen until after
Definitely not.
2004.
Yeah.
So that's number one, right? So the time that we had to spend learning the game was limited, and there was a financial barrier. Some
Yeah.
people could afford it, some people couldn't. So I guess what I'm trying to point out is the incentive to use, I guess, what we could term as a stronger character is obviously a lot greater than it is now, I would say. Because, well, I mean, there's still obviously reasons to use a strong character. But back in the day, like, it was tough, if we were to use a really weak character, you're not just losing matches, you're losing money, and you're losing
It's
an
true.
opportunity to learn more about the game because you're not
Right.
playing. You're
You
waiting
got
to
to go
play
back to the
more than
line.
you're playing.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so, but then on the other hand, it's like, I guess what I'm trying to point out is it's kind of a weird sort of vicious circle because say you want to drop a lower tier character, you want to play a better character because you want to, sometimes sometimes we do that just out of necessity because we just want to learn the game. We want more opportunities to learn the game. We don't have any opportunities if we keep losing. But at the
Hmm.
same time, sometimes using that stronger character, at least looking back on it in retrospect, sort of prevented us from maybe learning the game in a more efficient or effective way. We started to
Yeah.
kind of concentrate on the things that weren't really what's important. Like you said it earlier yourself, like in the genesis of learning any kind of game, the character selection doesn't really matter as much.
Yeah.
It's learning the mechanics of the, but we didn't really have that luxury really in
No.
America, at least in our scene.
It took a while. I would say that. So about the idea that we had more incentive to play top tier then, I think I disagree with that because to win a tournament back then would be to win $50
Yeah.
at a big one, right? A smaller local would be maybe you'd win $15. I don't know. To win a major now, especially in games with big esports tours, is to win a house,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's to
I just
win
I just meant
free
I
college
just
education. So I think
yeah,
there's you have to pick a good character
yeah.
now if those are the stakes. But
I
yeah,
just
I
I
mean,
just meant in the context of learning the
I get
game.
it otherwise. Yeah,
You
sure,
know.
sure. But as far as the second point, I think I think a big part of why I became like so interested in all the little minutia of fighting games was that I was playing Q.
Hmm.
Because I remember, conversations. For example, I remember talking with a guy named Rob in Interface, I think, a Chun Li player,
Rob Greco.
and Greco. There you go,
Yeah,
dude.
he
Yeah,
actually came to Brooklyn about a year ago.
yeah.
He was there for work, and
Wow,
he stopped by, and it's just so awesome for him
that's so.
to
Is he
come
all
to.
right? I don't. What I haven't talked with him in a
Yeah,
decade at least.
he's doing his thing,
Cool.
and
Good.
but he doesn't really play all that often anymore, like a lot of us.
Okay. Well,
But
I
yeah,
remember this conversation with him in mid 2000s, maybe mid to late 2000s. So I'd been playing for already several years. Um, he was complaining to me about Chun Li light kick because he was like, this button
light
doesn't do
kick,
anything.
light kick.
Yeah, in particular, yeah, the light kick button. He was like, this button doesn't do anything. It's not super cancelable. There's no usage to it. It sucks. Like I'm not jumping with it. I would never do it on the ground. I'd never do it as a crouching button. I'd never press this button. I hate this is so useless. And meanwhile, I'm thinking like I don't have anything that even does anything that your character does. Like if I had Chun Li shorts, I'd be happy as a Q player. I could find a bunch of ways to use those things. Um, and to the idea that you wouldn't use a button because it doesn't combo into super, it doesn't cancel into super, was completely off the wall for me because my character has two and at range got zero as far as normals go. And so I don't know. I had to dig in so deeply to milk anything out of the character. Whereas people I knew, friends I had who were playing top tiers, they could just get by with the fact that they didn't even need to think about what the possible uses of these other buttons were. They could just do fierces and medium kicks and strongs and get by with a much smaller understanding of what the game was because their character let them do that. So I think that sort of in retrospect, in one way I'm happy that I did play a weaker character because I think that that influenced me to really try to get everything I could out of every situation, which meant that I needed to learn a lot, which meant that I needed to really like have the knowledge on the top of my head, which became very important later when I was asked to commentate. So I think that's developing that. I think actually like was really important for me. I wouldn't have recognized that I think at the time, but in looking back, I think that was really handy actually. So I lost a lot at the time. I was disappointed in myself. Like I said, I quit Third Strike for a while because of it. But I think in the end, understanding how to win with a weaker character, or at least the process of trying to figure that out, was I think really beneficial for me.
What I really love, and thank you for sharing that anecdote, but what I really loved about that anecdote is, to me, it really encapsulates kind of the point that I was trying to make earlier about how maybe America could have approached learning the game as opposed to the way we did. Because if you recall, you talked a little bit about the differences between the way that the West Coast played and the East Coast played, and you had used the word offensive, right? Offense.
Hmm.
To me, what your anecdote really demonstrates is that as a weaker character, you have to pay more attention to sort of defensive aspects of the game.
Uh huh.
And personally, I feel like that's Third Strike is really a defensive game. I mean, just to me, like in terms of like the parry, right? Like for example, what makes Third Strike Third Strike? The parry.
Sure.
The parry is a defensive tactic, but it permeates throughout every aspect of the game. But
Yep.
at the same time, I feel like, and again, because of the things that we had to deal with back in the day, that the fact that we couldn't just have the luxury to play all the time, or we had
Right.
financial barriers and so forth and so on, and so So for those players who decided to abandon a weaker character and to use a top character, kind of like with Rob Greco, right? Think about the
Mm-hmm.
conversation you had. He was complaining about, like you said, oh, light kick doesn't do anything. Like he's thinking from an offensive point of view. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
so, I think,
Meanwhile, like
yeah,
in reality, it's actually she has some good stuff.
yeah.
Like her shorts are useful in some ways. He just didn't need to think about that at least the level we were all playing at. I mean, we weren't at
Hmm.
a high enough level. He was a good player, but we weren't at the high enough level to like really have to get everything out of even the top tier characters.
Hmm.
I don't know if anybody in our area was, maybe just a few people.
Hmm.
So
Well,
yeah, it
because the
was.
bottom line was about winning still, at least when we were, when we were
Of
playing,
course, yeah, yeah, it was about winning, but you didn't. You won. You continue to improve if you needed to, right? That's
Yeah,
still how
yeah.
it is. You improve if you need to, and if your scene is smaller, and if your scene doesn't have people using the strongest characters, then if you are somebody who's good and you are using a strong character, then you don't need to put in the time to continue to win. And so most people don't. Most people don't continue to improve under those circumstances. Now, again, I think especially in SoCal, I think we had players who were doing that, but it just wasn't. There weren't that many.
And that's kind of why I switched. There's a lot of reasons why I switched from Ken to Necro, and I've said, and I've talked, and I've told this story in other episodes. But that is one of the reasons why ultimately I switched to Necro, because I feel
Mm,
like using Ken was not putting me in the right mindset to get better at the game. Some
interesting.
some players don't need that. You have players like Justin, Chris G, Ricky. They're like, to me, they're like on a certain level where it's just they just get it. There's really no
Yeah,
other.
dude,
There's really no
that's
other
exactly
way.
what it is. It's exactly what it is for Justin, right? Because Justin was maybe the best Chun, maybe the best player in the country for a while, and he was doing it with a Chun Li that like didn't know how to Kara throw, didn't have any extra tech, no option selects used. Like he didn't need to at that time, at least, because he just got it to a degree where he could just play like basic footsies and just use regular grabs, and that was enough, right? That was enough for him
Yeah.
at that time,
So,
anyway.
I think maybe this would be a good time to take our second break, David. But when we come back, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the third strike scene today and how you see it moving forward. I'd love to get your thoughts on the Jazzy circuit, obviously.
Hmm.
Maybe talk a little bit more about the situation that's going on right now regarding the coronavirus. And then one other segment. I'm trying to remember what that segment is. I think the Stream Monsters can help me out and remind me what else we have to do in the last segment of the show. But anyway, don't go anywhere. We're gonna take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll have more Mutant XPerience podcast with UltraDavid. So stick around, guys. Hey guys, Mutant XP back on the mic. We are back with more Mutant XPerience podcast, episode 37, with our special guest, UltraDavid. Before we continue with the podcast, David, I want to make a couple of announcements concerning some future Jazzy events. We at the circuit have learned that Mackay Cup will be altering its event in response to the coronavirus situation. We just discovered on Twitter that Mackay Cup has decided to suspend all non-Vampire Savior events at Mackay Cup. So for those of you who don't know, we had originally scheduled to have a ranking event at Mackay Cup this year, and so obviously that will no longer occur. And so if you guys have any questions about, that, contact either us or Mackay Cup. I think you can follow them on, let me just go ahead and, why did I close it? Just wanted to type in their handle on Twitter real quick, in case you guys have any more further questions about what's going on at Mackay Cup. Actually, just follow Vampire Arcadia, and just check them out for more information on what's going on with Mackay Cup. I don't know if that's the case, Medenka, but if that is true, then I'm picking up VSAP tonight.
Oh man.
Also, another announcement. Arliath, the Jazzy TO who runs events in the SoCal area, has decided to postpone this Saturday's Jazzy Circuit Third Strike tournament that was supposed to take place at Don's Arcade. So for more information on that, you can just go ahead and follow Arliath on Twitter as well. So, such a bummer, man, hearing all these event cancellations.
For sure.
Crazy. Like I know it's like cliched to say this, but like everyone's saying it. But it really does feel like a movie.
Yeah,
really
I know what you mean. Yeah, it's very weird. Very weird time.
Well, hopefully not, Dirt Master.
Hopefully not.
We'll see what happens.
And by obviously it's not just Third Strike that's having to deal with this,
definitely,
right? Like every game has.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the end of Overwatch League? Yeah, I mean it's even like the huge things, right? Are like pretty concerned about it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that that you mentioned that, because I know one of the things that a lot of people are concerned with in general in the FGC is how a lot of these players, a lot of the competitors are going to be off, how they're going to handle the financial impact,
right,
that the coronavirus situation is having on them. And one of the things that I think maybe, obviously we could use this as an opportunity as the FGC is to, I encourage like a lot of the players and a lot of the people in the FGC to think about, maybe, different content they can create, that they can, as a way to do that. Obviously, David, we talked about how, kind of like your genesis as someone who likes to, educate the scene about certain games. You're talking about your Q primer that you wrote on SRK. And I think for players that are worried about, their livelihood and how coronavirus is going to impact that, this would be a great opportunity for players to kind of give back to the scene and maybe, create content designed, to sort of educate players and share some of that knowledge. I don't know. And what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I think content is definitely important right now. Yeah. For players, for everybody, streamers. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be events, it seems. So if you want to like be involved mm-hmm. in actively doing stuff in the FGC, or if it's your plan, or if you can make money on doing stuff, then it's your content's really all you got right now. Yeah.
So if anything does happen with the circuit, when things get back to normal, I expect all my Third Strike players to be godlike. But when we start running tournaments regularly or whatever decision we make. So that's the challenge that I'm posing to at least the Third Strike players. But anyway, let's get back to you, David. One of the things we didn't really get to talk about in the last segment were some of the specific things that really drew you to Q.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what were those things? I know that you talked a little bit about how you felt that Q sort of fit your personality. Like, I was wondering if you'd
Yeah,
be willing to kind of expound on that and provide us a little
totally,
more
totally.
details.
So right off the bat, I just think he's really cool. I don't know if it's I guess it's not visible right now, but I have a little bead sprite of Q like right there. It's like right next to my door. I just think he's awesome. He's my favorite fighting game character. He looks really cool. But even beyond that, once I got to the phase of starting to understand what his gameplay's like, I felt that it fit exactly what I like to do in fighting games. Again, once I sort of developed an understanding of what it is that I like to do, and maybe having played Q is why I like this, but whatever. I like a defensive grappler, and that's really rare. Most fighting games that have grapplers, the grapplers are offensive, right? They're about making mix-ups actively happen. They're about rushing in and playing the mix-ups up close, and maybe you'll win. Q's not like that. Q, to the extent that his command grab matters, it's more about really catching the opponent off guard. It's more about like turning like unexpected situations into command grab situations. His play style is primarily about sort of mid range to defensive choices, and he has to do that without something like a DP. Um, and so he requires a play style that I think it has to be really precise. He is primarily defensive focused, and that fit me because when I was younger, I played a lot of sports until I just got too many injuries and had to quit. But I played hockey and football and basketball and martial arts and all sorts of stuff. And in all of those, what I liked primarily was defense. I got more satisfaction out of stopping somebody's breakaway than I did scoring on a breakaway myself. I got more out of blocking a shot or intercepting a pass than I did catching a pass or than I did like sinking a shot myself. I was always more into that. Even in martial arts, I preferred a style that was more keep away, that was more patient. I was not very active. So I've always felt that that's what I prefer. And in fighting
Mm-hmm.
games, again, I didn't intend to pick Q for this reason, but I think it ultimately worked out very well because that is the style that I felt was successful with Q. So when I was thinking about switching or not, it wasn't just that I thought he was a cool character, it was that I felt that he fit with me really, really well. And it's been rare that I've been able to find fighting game characters in other games that do have that sort of defensive grappler mindset. Um, I played Honda in Super Turbo. I played Geef, but then I sort of switched my main to Honda after a while, and it was the same kind of reason. I felt that I could play this defensive grappler mindset, at least in a bunch of matchups, not in every matchup, but I felt that fit me really, really well. That I could play slow, that I could be deliberate, that I could frustrate the opponent, and that at the same time I could still land grabs, which I've always found really fun. So yeah, I think that was what kept me with Q rather than just that he was cool, which was the initial draw. It was that I felt that he fit what I like to do in fighting games really, really well.
Mm-hmm. So, what are some of the things that over time you've sort of maybe at first these were some of the things that frustrated you about the character?
Mm.
So I guess it's a two-part question. So what are some of the things that used to frustrate you about the character, and do they still frustrate you? And I guess the related part two of the question is sort of how did that sort of perspective change in terms of some of the things that you were frustrated about the character? I don't know if that
Yeah, I
makes
mean
sense. But...
there are things that I found and continue to find frustrating. Of course, I mean I would love to have some kind of hit confirmable button at range.
Yeah, I think a lot of well, I do.
I mean,
Never
right? Yeah, same,
mind.
right? I mean, there's that's such an important part of why some of the characters who are strong. That for him not to have anything like that is definitely a big bummer. Um,
Well, I mean, he
so
does.
I,
So you wouldn't count close crouching medium as a as
well, I mean,
a.
he's got useful footsies, but he just doesn't. You're not doing like you're not walking around with hit confirming into super,
Oh yeah, you
really.
mean like that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, He's got some good buttons, definitely. They're just not into significant damage. So you're kind of whittling away life. Although obviously he can be super explosive if he gets the right situation.
Yeah.
It's more commonly that he's like whittling away. Um, so on the one hand, I do think that is annoying in the context of a game where the strong characters are really explosive. Um, but at the same time, I think that like I was saying in the last segment, I think that I took his weaknesses too seriously, so seriously that I didn't continue the search for the strengths.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, it was rare still to see videos of other people playing Q. It wasn't until like the mid 2000s that we started to see more footage out of Japan. And so, for a while, I would watch Kuroda, as every Q player did, not just Q players, right? And we would watch him and think like, this guy is doing stuff that's just like not accessible to mortals. Like, I just can't do some of these things. He makes reads that are just too good, and that's not practical for me to do. So I watched him and thought, and sort of, he was like the proof to me that there was no future for the character, even though he was like doing okay. It was that he is such a solitary genius that like can't be replicated. That if he isn't even winning everything with this character, then there's just no future. So I didn't continue the search for the good stuff, and it wasn't until a little later that I started seeing footage out of other Qs that were, in Japan, still are playing in Japan, that that did find more sort of practical good stuff. Like Kuroda his playstyle was so unique. You could see him. I mean, sure you've watched the Kuroda DVDs. He plays each character as Kuroda, right? Like he's not playing them in the same way that other people are playing those characters. He's just a unique kind of player. So those other Qs that started to do well, they did find more stuff. They found more uses for the mobility of the character. They found more uses of some of his normals. They found more uses in terms of what some of his pressure tools could be. And I didn't continue that search. So I think that I kind of sold my ability to play short with the character because I got into my head too much about him being weak. He's still one of the weaker characters in the game, of course, but he's not, I think, as bad as I felt at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the key. This applies with so many other characters. And this kind of speaks on this whole concept of the tier list or whatever. I'm one of those players that doesn't really pay a whole lot of attention to tier lists. Probably because I'm so insular, right? Like my only game I play is Third Strike.
Mm-hmm.
But it's funny to say that even because a lot of the earliest controversies when it came to tiers and just in FGC in general were about Third Strike. The whole, Ken, Chun, Yun, and how much of a game that is. Like in terms of those debates over whether a game should be balanced or not. Obviously, Mike Z felt about it so strongly that he decided to actually balance Third Strike.
Right.
With that write-up that he made. But trying to remember what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, that's right. So like to me, right, it's Q is dangerous, but like the amount of danger you have to put yourself in order to be dangerous, I think is a big determining factor on how difficult a character is. To me, with Q, the challenge is, like you were saying, like really how to turn defense into offense.
Right.
That to me is probably a really important key. Because like you said, Q is not the kind of character that can just, walk around the screen and try to DED everyone, It doesn't, he's not that, he's just not
Can't do that. Yeah.
So, you have to kind of play him a very different way.
Yeah.
It does require more patience. It requires a little more time and research. And again, kind of just to kind of connect to the stuff that we talked about in the last segment, a lot of us didn't have that luxury. No. And when we were first starting the game. And so that's kind of interesting. Have you thought about because obviously when we think about the biggest Third Strike event of the year, we think the Cooperation Cup.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you try to watch Cooperation Cup every year.
Totally.
And I don't remember what Cooperation Cup it was, but I think the most recent pre-coup, or maybe the one the year before, a Q
You
team
talk
made top
about the
8?
Q team? I think that was 2 years ago.
That was
Yeah.
2 years ago. What were your reactions when you saw that? And
I knew that they were going to get 7th.
but it was gonna be hype though.
It was hype. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I strongly believe in tiers.
Yeah.
I think it's like a very large part of any fighting games, even ones that are pretty well balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that Third Strike is one of the ones that are more balanced. So I think that, yeah, I mean, as a Q player, you can certainly go further than what I did with the character. Absolutely. There's a ceiling, and even for the most genius of players, that ceiling is not winning a major.
But when you were watching that pre-coup, like you as a Q player and as a Third Strike player, were you not like, oh, TM could have done this, or oh,
sure, yeah, right.
Oh, I mean, if he had just done that, and to me,
definitely.
that's kind of where it's like there's always that glimmer of hope. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I love Third Strike so much. There always seems to be hope being dangled in front of you.
It's the kind of game where, as the player, if you just happen to make every right choice,
yes,
more than most games, you're gonna win. There are some games where if you make 9 out of 10 right choices, some games you might lose. But Third Strike, that's like, if you're making the right choices, then you win because of the parry, basically. So sure, there's like this idea that you think where you should be able to do it, but I think that's more of like an aspirational kind of thing, and not actually like any of our lived experiences outside of like we've all had the matches where we're like, I'm a genius and I can do no wrong, right? But that's rare. It's rare, especially against competition that's at your play level as well. So yeah, I mean, when I watched that was sick. It was a blast. I really enjoyed watching it. I was sure they were going to lose. So yeah, I mean, I think those are all possible at the same time. I don't think there's any contention between them.
All right. Well, I think this would be a great segue into our recurring segment that we always do towards the end of the Mutant XPerience podcast. So speaking of aspirations, David, one of the things that I aspire to do as a member of the Third Strike community is to help players get better.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly believe that one of the things that can help players get better is if you just call some players out on the things that they do.
Okay.
And so, obviously, this is the first time you've been in the Mutant XPerience podcast. And so we do a segment called Pack It Up. Basically, it's a segment where I scour the internet for some of the more, I guess we could call unique instances of Third Strike play.
Okay.
And so I just thought we could get right into it and show everyone what's going on with Third Strike. I will say, David, though, that as I've continued to do this segment, it's still not that difficult to find nominees, but it is, I do have to scour a little bit harder. But so without further ado, guys, sort of to lighten the mood in the midst of all this doom and gloom, here's this week's edition of Pack It Up. All right.
Dang, the graphics package.
Pack It Up. Nominee number 1. And so this is from one of the Lost Ark Jazzy tournaments. And so the Chun player, I think, pressed that grab button a little bit too early.
Dang, all right.
This is one of the situations where maybe having an air grab is not the most optimal.
Dang, you actually might be right, yeah.
Nominee number 2. The Japanese are godlike, but even they can't defy physics. For some reason, this Yang player thinks that they can punish. I don't know what they try to do.
I supposed to have been super? What is it?
Before I added this clip to Pack It Up, I even messaged Yuki. And I was like, Yuki, what was going on here? Because maybe I didn't understand it.
Right.
Speaking of grapplers, this is from a recent Arizona tournament. This Alex player having little delusions of grandeur here. Just kind of thinking that their power bomb has that gi frame.
This is so well produced, dude. This is rad.
Shout outs to Shotokan.
Oh no.
If there's one thing we can rely on when we watch Shotokan play, it's that there are certain points where he almost forgets that he has Gainasian.
Okay, yeah.
And to compound matters even worse, he uses the meter at the end. But
right.
Anyway, shout out to Shotokan, one of the strongest Yun players in the country. And then this is from a recent Brooklyn tournament. I respect the red parry attempt, UltraDavid.
Yeah, for sure. That's
but what I don't
yeah.
respect is this. Okay, I mean it's simple math. You got a move that's airborne in frame 4.
Oh no.
Maybe.
How many was that?
let's count. So that's 1. That's 2.
Dang, what?
That's 3. That's 4.
Genius. Yeah. But haven't you been there before?
I have, but I know I know to knee drop now, or I knew to do something like guard.
I don't know, man. Sometimes you just make the wrong choice.
Yeah,
what are you gonna do?
But Ken is scary. Anyway, tweet me, guys, what your favorite is. Nominees 1 through 5. You know, what do you think, David? Who do you think should win? Who do you think should win the this week's pack?
Dang. Okay, I'm gonna go with number 5 because. Yeah. Although I've been there, I've taken 1,000 grabs and lost. Yeah. Those are decisions being made. The other ones are basically screw ups, right? Like they screwed up. Yeah. That you had to make a choice 5 times in a row, and you got it wrong every single time. So pack it up for sure.
But like you couldn't do that like in a game like 5, right? Like or is that still
that happens
something?
all the time in 5. Oh yeah, for sure.
But that it's not as looked down at. Like is that less of a decision, matter of decision?
Bad.
Okay.
No, you feel, but you can definitely get out of it for sure. You feel bad, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Because there's that popular 5 meme, right? Just take the grab. Just take
that's
grab.
What they say, but part of why that's a meme is that it's like stupid at the same time. Like you shouldn't actually do that. Yeah.
So, before we close out the podcast, David, what are your thoughts kind of on the future of the American Third Strike scene and, sort of how you see things moving forward and, just not just even on a community level, but yourself, what does the future hold for UltraDavid, the Third Strike player? Sure.
For me personally, it's only recently that I feel that I can play fighting games competently again. I will always have impinged nerve in my spine that has made it so that I can't control my hands very well. And that I developed that over years, but it began to be really serious in about 2010, 2011. And so by 2012, I quit competing in tournaments. So not until this year have I competed in tournaments again. And I ended up, over the last couple of years, I needed physical therapy for other reasons. My shoulders tendons were just starting to fray on their own. So I needed to get physical therapy. And in that context, I also, I told my physical therapist, like, I'd like to control my hands better. And we figured out a way finally. And so it took a lot of work, but it is getting there now. So I've been playing fighting games more again. And I've entered tournaments for Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter V. And am feeling more confident. Like I'll never be at a place where I can control my hands 100%, but it's at a more confident feeling. And, this is, I think, particularly relevant for something like Third Strike, which whenever I play it, it's on arcade. I've switched to hitbox or to splitbox, really, different kind of control mechanism, because for a long time, grasping a joystick even was difficult for me. The physical act of doing, I couldn't open a jar. Like it was to that degree. So I neglected Third Strike. I neglected my ability to play every fighting game for many, many years, 7-8 years. Now I feel that I'm at a place again where I can do it. So my goals are basically to do well, especially in the games that I'm commentating, because I feel like I need to have that, right? I need to sort of be competent in those games.
It's all about ethos.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to be able to talk about a game like properly, I feel like I should know how to play. So that's what's most important to me. But for sure, right after that is ability to play Third Strike. It's something that I really miss. And when I do go to majors and play, like when at ECT, whatever, typically tends to be East Coast majors that have that stuff. It's always a reminder about how terrible I am. And not that I was ever like a great Third Strike player. I was only okay, but I now am at such a low ebb of my ability to play the game that I really miss it. So I've gone a couple of times to Oric's house in SoCal, who has a Third Strike cab, and
And
played there.
when you play there, shout outs to Oric, by the way.
Yeah,
But when you play there, do you play on the sticks, or do you connect a hitbox to a?
just sticks.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm keeping that around in my brain, like how to play stick rather than only being
Hmm.
hitbox. And I'm only doing that because occasionally I'll get a chance to play Third Strike and Super Turbo on arcade cab. So I still want to be able to do that just for those moments.
You hear that,
And yeah, I
guys?
mean,
This is how much UltraDavid loves Third Strike. He is willing to
yeah.
risk his health to play the
Well, I
game.
mean, it's taken a lot of work to feel like I can like control myself, especially on a stick again. So the other side of this is that while I've been letting myself not, sort of fall into not being a good player anymore, um, I also feel very divorced from the scene itself. So
Hmm.
like my experiences of it are really just the stuff that you're doing. And when I've, had a chance to hang out and play Third Strike at majors after hours, or to watch stuff that's streamed by, Art's been doing some stuff, Arlieth, right? That kind of thing. Those are the moments when I get a chance to play, or to watch, or even just experience the community anymore. I want to get to a point where I can feel like I can take part as a community player. I That's going to take some work for me to get back there, but it's now something that I feel like is doable rather than feeling like it's just impossible and that I don't need to think about it at all. So from my perspective, I don't feel that I have a great grasp on where the U.S. Third Strike scene is, because I feel that I've just moved away from it. I'm excited to get back into it, but it's been so many years since I feel like I've really been like an active participant that, yeah, I'm not sure I have a lot of stuff to say other than I think what you're doing is fantastic.
Well, thank you, David. And I just want to begin by saying a Third Strike scene with UltraDavid is a better Third Strike.
Thanks, man. I miss it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and in terms of wanting to get back and compete, uh, one of the reasons why I continue to do the Jazzy circuit is, to me, it's important that we, especially as the FGC is getting older and older, we start thinking about recording our history of
Yes.
each scene. And I think one of the things that I think I would like Jazzy Circuit to help with is, and kind of why I do this podcast, is, I want to make sure that there are players that were associated with the game that's meant so much to me. I want to give them an opportunity to give their testimony and to let everyone know about their experiences. Because obviously I love this game, you love this game, and it would be great if future generations love this game. And so,
Hmm.
as far as you feeling sort of out of touch with the current scene, I totally understand that. But, as one of those early players and pioneers of the scene, you'll always have a place in the in Third Strike lore, if you will.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
So before we get out of here, I thought maybe we could take a look at some of these questions that we have in the chat. Some of them are
Yeah.
pretty random, so
Okay.
feel free to answer them, or whether you want to respond to them or not. So
Okay.
one question we got was, how was law school? I want to go myself, so I want to hear from a first-hand veteran of the school.
Wow. Okay. Well, I went to law school from 2005 to 8, so I'm not sure what's changed at this point. Probably
Uh-huh.
some stuff at least. But yeah, I loved it, man. I loved going to school. I
Hmm.
was never somebody who was ready to get out of school. When I was done with school, I missed it. I like learning stuff, and reading stuff was a blast. Um, so I actually really enjoyed law school. That is, however, I didn't take it super seriously. I should have, but I didn't. So my grades were not good, and part of why I couldn't find a job afterward is that even though I'd been to like Georgetown and Berkeley, I just like didn't have good grades in law school. So part of why I went back to get my Master of Laws at UCLA was to like actually do it right,
Hmm.
and I did, and I did take it seriously, and I did well. I still didn't find a job after that. It was just like a bad era for it. But yeah, anyway, I enjoyed it. Legal philosophy is something that I just still read anyway. I just like philosophy of law and theory of law and copyright theory, and I just read it for fun. So for me, it was not it wasn't a burden at all. I really enjoy practicing law, but I would say that if you're somebody who's thinking about practicing law or going to law school, that you try working for a lawyer first.
Mm.
My now wife, the context under which we met was we were at a mutual friend's house. My friend knew that I was a lawyer and that she wanted to go to law school. And so he was like, here, don't you guys chat about law? And she really wanted to go to law school. And I said, you should really try to work in law first to see if you hate it or if you like it. And she hated it. She worked for one lawyer and hated it, worked for another, hated it, worked for a third, hated it. They were all doing different kinds of law. She just didn't like what actual day-to-day practice of law is. And she wouldn't have known that if she hadn't tried. So I knew a lot of people who went to law school and went through the whole process of it and came out and it was time to practice law and they hated it too. So make sure that it's something that you are actually into. It's no longer an easy way to just make a lot of money. The legal profession is not like that anymore.
Mhm.
It's not, you're not getting paid peanuts or anything, but if the goal is to be like the maximum earner that you can, not law. It's not law anymore. It's business.
Mhm.
So anyway, try it out. Make sure that it's something you care about first.
So on a semi-related question, we have this popular phrase in the 3S scene. The phrase is 3S is life. And
Mhm.
so has Third Strike, have you noticed if sort of any kind of crossover in terms of Third Strike and just sort of your career, like say in law or in life or anything? Like, is there anything that's sort of looking back on it, you go, wow, okay.
When I was in law school, I remember thinking that when I was in law school was the height of me feeling a connection with Q.
Mhm.
It was just coincided with those years. And I remember thinking about a lot of stuff in law school and just in general life and through the context of Third Strike. Like when in class, if I was assigned to defend an argument in some moot court that was a weak argument, I would think, I've been here before. I've been trying to make things happen as a low tier character this entire time. So I feel like this is my wheelhouse, man. I can definitely make this happen. Uh, and that, when I worked in politics for a while, and in working in politics, it was really important for me to do things to support the candidates that I really liked and the policies that I really liked, rather than to just go with whoever's doing well or who has a job or whatever. Um, and I likened that too to sticking with the character that mattered to me. Like it was important to me. It had become, like I said, like a part of my self identity, and the sort of stubbornness of sticking with what I thought I should stick with mattered to me in Third Strike, and something that I feel like became concrete in Third Strike. But it also, I felt the same way when I was thinking about like politics and which politician to work with, would I take a job out of law school where I had to like foreclose on people's houses? I would not, and
Mhm.
I'd be like, well, in game I wouldn't. I'm not going to give up and just play the top tier, which that would pay me a lot, right?
Yeah, okay.
And
Yeah.
it was the same way in law. So yeah, I definitely found a lot of points of crossover with my life in general and with Third Strike for sure.
Awesome, awesome. And so last question. So I think Katie Alpha in the chat, that was to Katie Alpha. He asks, how do you prepare for a major event as a commentator? And do you ever worry about
Ooh.
embarrassing yourself on stream?
I don't worry about it anymore because I know what's gonna happen.
Okay,
It's
that's great
it,
advice. That's
I budget for it, right? Like mentally, I'm gonna get something wrong. Maybe I'll
uh-huh.
say USA sucks at Third Strike. I don't know. I don't remember saying that, but maybe I'll say something stupid like that. I mean,
Uh-huh.
that's that in the moment of commentating. I'll get some things wrong. I just can't be 100%. I'd like to be, but it's not plausible. Very difficult to do. And sometimes I'll stumble over my words, or sometimes a word will come out that's not actually doesn't describe the situation right. So it's something like that instance. Um, so I have grown to accept that, and knowing that I can more easily concentrate on the other things that do matter, like general preparation. So making sure I know the game, making sure I know which players are going to be there, making sure I know the bracket and make like likely chances, making sure that I know who I'm going to be commentating with, and I've thought in advance about how that person commentates and how I can commentate with them in a way that would be the best. So yeah, there's definitely there's definitely quite a bit of preparation that I do. Um, Different people have different takes on that. So, like some people will come up with funny things to say in advance and kind of have them lined up for when those situations come. Some people will be a little bit more ad hoc,
Spontaneous, yeah.
yeah, a little bit more spontaneous about it. Some people will commentate. Maybe their style of commentary doesn't require that they know the like individual frame data of moves. Maybe that's not required for what they like to do. So they prepare with different things instead. But for many of us who have been commentating for a long time at this point, a lot of that now comes naturally, so we don't have to think about it so much anymore. But you still have to think about things like, or you should anyway. You should look at which players will be there and sort of have their stories in your mind and have their character choices and what they like to do in game in mind. So those are for me. Those are the things that I still do prepare on a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely still a craft, regardless of what
Yeah.
game you commentate. And then on another related question, as a commentator, um, and again, correct me if my history is too colored with Third Strike glasses, but
Okay.
but from what I remember, as far as fighting game footage, uh, one of the first sort of more notable examples of commentary on fighting games were a lot of the FFA videos with
Yeah.
Rockefeller and John D. And so I just wondering if you've thought at all about sort of the legacy that the Third Strike scene has left in terms of presenting fighting games and the way we present them now to our viewers, commentary and stuff.
I was just thinking about this the other day. I kind of
Awesome.
was thinking about the like how to sort of arrange the classification of commentators in the way that you might do for like organisms on Earth. So you could think of like a kingdom of plants and a kingdom of animals and eukaryotes and whatever. And I was and thinking about like where do the commentators fit in that kind of context? Who is the commentator that we've all sort of sprung from,
Mm-hmm.
and who then creates a different branch that goes elsewhere, right? I think that's very interesting to think about. So I was thinking about that, and the conclusion that I came to was that Artosis and Yipes are like the ultimate. They're where the springs come from, and then we all sort of come down. But I would also say that I thought where I put John D was separate. He's like separate from the realm of life otherwise, because he was so unique, and we've never done that again.
Uh-huh.
That style of commentary is gone,
Yeah.
and so he's just like he's a separate part of life and didn't have any descendants and didn't come from anywhere. I would say that that's how it is for him. His style, I mean, look, a lot of the jokes that he makes are not things that we would say today
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
but his delivery was so unique, and the things that he brought up, even if he's not telling the jokes that we wouldn't say anymore, he is not commentating the game in a way that we would say that we commentate games anymore, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he's there, he's hilarious, he's being really funny, he's ripping on the players. Yeah, I mean, I was there for many of those recordings, and I'm actually on at least one of them. He like gives me the mic for a little bit. Uh, he's just there, like next to, literally right next to the players.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
They're at a cab. He is right next to them. The
Yeah.
player's here, and he's looking at them, and that kind of thing we just haven't done anymore, right? I mean, so the entire experience of that, I feel like, is something that was great, was awesome for its time, was hilarious, inspired people to get into commentary, inspired people to sort of care about somebody talking over a game, because before that we didn't, I mean, if you saw footage, it was only of the gameplay itself, and I don't remember thinking that there was any need for anything else. But when I saw him, or when I heard him, that was the first time when I thought, this is cool. Like, I actually like having somebody. I just never even thought about it before. So I think if there's a legacy for him, that it's that, because nobody has adopted the same style of
Mm-hmm.
of commentary. Is what I would say. I'd say that if there's the sort of hype man style, I think that the descendants of that are people who come from Yipes's ideas, uh, rather than from Rockefeller's.
Mm-hmm. And if somehow you catch this, John D. Rockefeller, uh, Dr. Sub-Zero. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I remember he had like 80 names at some point. Like,
Yeah. That was it. Yeah.
I'd love to have you on a podcast, man. I don't know where you are right now, but it would be awesome. Definitely.
The last time I heard about him, I believe it was that he got married and moved to Canada.
Wow. Okay.
But that was like a decade ago that I last even heard
Yeah.
that. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean he had a big impact on me in the sense that he made me think there was any reason to talk over fighting games.
Mm-hmm.
And although the way that I commentate is not like what he does, that idea of talking over fighting games was something that first for me came from him. So I think that there's like quite a bit of debt owed to somebody like him as being a trailblazer.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was him and Artosis and Tasteless who made me think that commentary made any sense,
Yeah.
or was useful.
Yeah, and as irreverent, you know, as John D's commentary was, I don't know if you felt the same way, but I never, when I was listening to those FFA videos, I never once doubted Rockefeller's knowledge of the game.
Oh, no way.
Right?
No way.
Like there were times
No
when
way.
he would drop these little he would make these little put in these little droplets of knowledge.
Yeah, you're absolutely
and then
right.
he would just make like little comments about like, okay, now maybe the players could start whiff punishing one another. Like, you know, like
right,
you could tell that he was super credible in terms of understanding not just, you know, the game in a technical standpoint, but also competing in general. And there was I never doubted that he was credible in that sense.
I agree with you, and I didn't doubt it anyway because I played against him at family sometimes, you know. So I knew that he was a strong player.
Yeah, awesome. So I think those are all the questions, but once again, thank you so much, David, for coming on the show. We really appreciate you know, your time, especially in these trying circumstances, if you will. But before we get out of here, just want to remind everyone about the Jazzy circuit. Once again, guys, I know many of you are very curious or anxious to hear what the Jazzy circuit is going to be doing moving forward. But for now, like I said, we have made no official decisions to alter anything regarding the schedule. That includes Final Round 2020. As far as the circuit is concerned, the auto qualifier at Final Round is still going on. And again, obviously, if anything changes, we'll let you know, particularly as well with regards to the Jazzy finale, which is still scheduled to take place at Free Play Arlington, June 12th through 14th. Like I said at the beginning of my podcast, the Jazzy circuit will issue a statement sometime before Wednesday, you know, regarding the steps that we're going to be taking moving forward. So before we get out of here, David, is there anything you wanted to say or anything you wanted to plug, or, you know, the floor is yours, man.
You know, I stream almost every day on twitch.tv/UltraChenTV. I'm pretty much mostly playing Street Fighter V and Mortal Kombat 11 on that. And James Chen and I still do a Tuesday show every Tuesday night on twitch.tv/UltraChenTV, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time, just talking all about, you know, tournament results and drama and news and everything like that in the FGC. And then on youtube.com/UltraChenTV is where we put all of our footage afterward.
Awesome. And again, a lot of people in our scene are gonna have a lot more time at home, you know, maybe more opportunities to stream and stuff. And so I guess where I'm getting at is there any chance that we could see a little bit more streaming Third Strike from your channel, or, you know,
sure, that's a good idea.
You know, maybe do a weird sort of first attack where you teach James how to play Third Strike, maybe.
Actually, I was talking with Vicious not long ago about playing Third Strike more and learning. He had the same experience last year of like going out to majors and commentating and having a chance to play Third Strike on arcade cabs while doing so at the little arcades people set up, and he too got mega dunked. So he used to be a pretty good Third Strike player, and we got to like commiserating about it, and we said like we would try not to suck in the future. So that sounds good.
Oh, and just before we go, because I told myself not to forget to ask this, and maybe you've addressed it on your show before, but do you and James play a lot with one another? Like ST
Not really.
or no? Okay.
No, we don't. We do play sometimes, but not that often.
Okay.
Well, like a big part of it was my own fault because like I said, I didn't really play fighting games that seriously for many years,
Uh-huh.
so I just like didn't really want to.
Mm-hmm.
But also, James doesn't like playing against me.
Uh-oh.
I'm serious.
Uh-oh.
You can ask him about it.
Okay.
He doesn't like playing against me. He thinks that I pick characters that beat his characters, and he thinks that I know it. I know his play style too well. So I have fun when we play, but he sometimes gets really frustrated. So
Oh, okay.
not that common. But we have been playing more lately, though.
Yeah.
We have been playing.
Well, shout outs to Jay Chansor. Please follow him on Twitter. It's at Jay Chansor, right? That's his Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah. James, when you're ready, Third Strike will be here.
Mm-hmm.
When you're ready. I like to say, David, everyone has a little bit of Third Strike in them. But hopefully maybe James turns around and maybe you could be a big part of that. So once again, David, thanks for showing up. Thanks to everyone for tuning into the podcast. And once again, please follow us on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter at Mutant XP or at the Jazzy Circuit for the latest on what we plan to do in response to everything that's going on. But in the meantime, I encourage everyone to please stay safe and good luck to everyone. And so you too, UltraDavid. And so until next time, see you guys later.